Welcome to the Awakening Entrepreneur podcast. This show is for entrepreneurs that have chosen to define their life beyond the material. They have followed their soul on a hero's journey towards the mystery of the spiritual. I'm your host, Garrett Ng. Each episode will be learning from awakened entrepreneurs and spiritual thought leaders. They have broken through the mold of being ordinary to extraordinary, challenging our paradigm, shining light to the dark, giving hope when there is doubt. The moment of truth is upon us. It is time to transcend our world from fear to love. Are you ready? Let's go! Welcome to the Awakening Entrepreneur podcast. So today we're really excited to have Thomas Green. Thomas Green, his title is called a Mindful Growth Hacker. But what I got to know of him, there's a lot of people that are successful in business that I've gotten to know over the years. But as I start to transcend on this path of awakening, which is a spiritual path, it was I didn't know any of my entrepreneur friends beyond caring about money. They were deep into spirituality. Yeah, some people meditate every so often here and there. But Thomas is someone that started his journey very, very successful in his entrepreneurial quest, in raising funds, building business one after the next around the globe, and advising different businesses as well. So from the entrepreneurial realm, in the physical realm of creating wealth and abundance, he's made it. But through a near-death experiences, one day, it really changed him as a person, got him to pursue the path of spirituality, which include plant medicine, going to learn about shamanism and building conscious businesses. And he's one of the transformation leaders in the world right now, highly regarded, speaks on many different stages. And I just reading a lot of his business philosophy, encompassing the spirituality and the conscious business of it. How does it look like if humanity really rises in its consciousness? How will we build business? And I guess the way that Tom has gone about in growing his business and mentoring other people is kind of the model that we want to follow for the future entrepreneurs and how humanity is moving towards, especially with the pandemic of the coronavirus that's going on right now. It's going to shift a lot of things. So without further ado, welcome, Tom.
Thank you. Hi, Gary. Pleasure
How
to
you
be
doing,
on
Tom?
your podcast. So yeah, thank you very much, Gary. I really appreciate it. It's great to come along and to share everything with you. You're absolutely right. There was a pivotal moment for me where life changed. I moved from being a capitalist to being something else. My dad always said that I had a little bit of a socialist bent. I never really understood what he meant when he called me a lefty, or because to all of my friends, I never was, because I was always after, making a buck. I remember at boarding school, I used to buy food from the tuck shop. 9, 10 years old, I used to buy food from the tuck shop, store it in my locker, and then 10, 11 o'clock at night, when everywhere was closed and kids wanted something to eat, I'd start selling packets of crisps at double the price. So I was always an entrepreneur and always really looking at how to make that quick turnaround, that quick buck. But I didn't really understand the consequence of our actions. I always had being nice to people and being nice to everybody I met front of mind. I mean, as a third generation retailer, you have to be completely and utterly customer focused and customer centric, because otherwise people don't come back to your retail. But absolutely, it was a pivotal moment for me where life changed, and I had this visceral experience that we can dive into later that really meant that I was no longer able to use the same scorecard as I had been doing previously.
Yeah. So tell me about some of your early ventures. So you were in retail with the family business. What kind of happened from there?
Yeah. So we grew there was a recession in the UK, and we grew out of that recession during that recession, because one of the things that a great mentor said is, be bold when others are fearful, or be fearful when others are bold. And you know, the Oracle Omaha, he really, Warren Buffett, who's the world's most successful investor, he really is quite amazing in the way that he chooses to do things. And so we looked at what the problems were in the industry. We had a department store. We saw that actually children's toys were growing. My dad remembers when he only got a wooden toy garage for his Christmas present when he was young. You know, there wasn't toys about. And so we grew the toy empire in the UK from 1 store to 30 stores. We had mail order businesses, all sorts of stuff. But my problem was that I spoke to the board and said, look, I think we've got to have an Amazon style website. Now, obviously we wouldn't have said Amazon style because Amazon wasn't about back then. But one of my friends was married to a Russian team of a Russian programmer, ran a Russian team of programmers. And for £20,000, which, you know, probably £100,000 today, which is $200,000, we would have had this website that would have ended all websites. It would have been, you know, cutting edge, doing most of the features that websites are today in 1998. And the board voted against it. They very narrowly almost bought I don't know whether the viewers can remember, but in 1997, 98, there was this weird thing happening on the internet where somebody who owned a really expensive piece of real estate in the real world, such as Jack Barkley of Berkeley Square, who owns a Rolls-Royce and a Bentley dealership in London, they owned barclaysquare.com as the domain name. And so everybody thought that if they had a shop on barclaysquare.com, then that would be the way forwards. And so I was offering £20,000 for this turnkey business that was going to be under, you know, toys.co.uk. And they were talking about going on and having a shop in barclaysquare.com. It just didn't make sense to me. And then I carried on. And the second time that I really realized that this business was not going to do the digital transformation it needed to was I had a friend from university who had just fallen across, he was head of Vodafone sales, which is a telco, and he'd just come across this new product they were about to launch. And he came to me and said, I think it's something really good. Would you like the license? And I was like, yeah, I think it's great. I took it to the board and said, how about pay-as-you-go mobile phones? Let's sell them through the stores. Every parent's going to want to buy their kids one so their kids can be found and looked after. And so, and the board went, nobody's going to pay in advance for mobile phones. And so that was really the turning point at the end for me, because I realized that business just wasn't digital. It wasn't thinking digital. The board wasn't able to cope with digital ideas. And so
How old were you at the time?
18, 19.
And for you, like, so for you to present something to the board, you had to do like formal proposal and all that, right?
Yeah.
At the age of 18, 19, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I kind of didn't really know any better, honestly. I left school at 16, and so that meant that while all of my friends were going through A levels and then university, I was just continuing my career in business. I'd been working in the business from, well, my mum says that I was 6 weeks old when I first sat under her desk in Moses basket while she was working. So I'd live and breathe business. You know, I would say that to me, I spent probably more time in the shop or the department store than I spent at home.
Was your parents supportive of you leaving school at 16?
I would say they were not supportive of me staying at school at 16.
Ah, interesting.
My dad said that, so it's interesting that there's only one member of my family that's been to university, and it's quite traditionally up north where I'm from, it's now more common to go to university, but, you know, talking 30 years ago, 25 years ago, it wasn't so common. And my dad said, come to the University of Life. You know, you're going to learn more in the University of Life than you'll ever learn at university. And there's a lot of truth in that. Absolutely. I was involved in mergers, acquisitions. I was involved in purchasing businesses. I was involved in setting up distribution centers, like all sorts of stuff. I remember going and scouting out a store in, I would have been, it was my first boarding school, so I would have been before 12, so 11 or 12. And I remember going and looking around a venue, getting the blueprints. I remember being on holiday in France, because we had a holiday home in France. I remember sitting around the table discussing, looking at CVs. And, you know, my brother was a little bit older than me, but the fact was that we still all had a say. So at 12 years old, I'd be looking through CVs for the manager who was going to take over this store, and I'd still have a say. Like, so I was never trained to be a member of staff. I was always trained to be management. And so I always had that mindset. Now, the flip side of that is, I remember my dad saying when I was about 18 or 19, you're either one of us or one of them. Meaning, you're either part of the management, you're part of the staff. I think it's an old style of management, and I chose to be one of them because I didn't want to separate and escalate myself above anybody else, because I never saw myself as being more important or more worthy or any of those than anybody else.
Yeah, it's kind of like the old age of entrepreneurship, and I'm sure there's a lot of wisdom at the time, and maybe it was the best thing to do at that time. I remember, like, when I was roughly like 18, there was a Hong Kong businessman, very, very successful, like multi-millionaire, and he says, Gary, if you want to be successful in life, you have to stop hanging out with your high school friends that you're playing games with, play cards with, whatever, and start hanging around very successful people, because the people that got you here is not going to get you there. You have to leave them behind. And I thought, like, that was kind of harsh. Like, if that's the way, like, I don't want to follow that path. There must be a different way. So it sounded like you went through something different, or very similar.
Yeah, absolutely. It was the same but different,
Yes.
right? It was, I went through the other side of it in that I left school at 16. All my friends were still at boarding school. So I'd gone back to our country town. I wasn't able to drive, of course, for that year. I didn't really have any friends around me because I'd left them all at boarding school. And so I just worked, and I made friends with the staff, and I made friends, and I known them for a long time because some of these people had worked for us for 15, 20 years. And so it just, you know, every year my birthday was on the only year the British Toy Fair was not held on my birthday was the year I was born.
Mm.
My mum makes a joke that they moved it for my birth. It's not strictly true, but you know, the fascinating is that because of that meant that every year my birthday would be shared with work colleagues. It would be shared with industry people we know. We'd go and have a Chinese where all of the managers from all the stores would sit together, and that would be my birthday. And so it's interesting that how can you have that mindset that you have to say that you have to separate yourself, and this is not casting any dispersions on my father. He was an amazing and is an amazing individual. He's an amazing businessman. I remember him saying to my brother that my brother had to make a choice. He wasn't able to marry a member of staff. Like, he couldn't date a member of staff. And I understand now, looking back with children, why that is, because we want the best for our children. And if you have the viewpoint of money, you might look at, and that's what the world scores success on. You might say, well, if you go out with somebody who already has a wealthy family and already comes from money, that means that you won't ever have to struggle. And if you never have to struggle, then that's the thing that the parent is trying to avoid. Whereas, and that's what I think that people mean by saying, you know, us or them. It's like, you know, marry within wealth, marry either the same or a bit more, and try and increase your position in life. But the problem with that is it's myopic in its scorecard, because it scores only financial success. And I don't know about you, Gary, but there's a lot of individuals I know who are insanely wealthy financially, but I wouldn't want them to look after my dog for 24 hours, you know, because not because they're not nice people, but they are focused on scorecard around wealth, that they're not present with life that happens around them.
Mm. And they are not a dog person.
Well, yeah, that one's for certain. I did think when I said it, that was probably a bit harsh. You know, there's not many people I wouldn't let them look after my dog for 24 hours, but I was trying to make a point in that it's just, you know,
I get it. So,
and these individuals, just jumping out to macro straight away, it's these individuals that are actually caretaking the planet for us. Because it's these individuals that are wealthy, have lots of money, have lots of businesses, and have the capacity for change. And they are the ones that are driving the current business landscape as you see them today. And I don't know whether you saw in the paper 2 days ago, not that I read the paper, but it was sent to me by one of my friends, saying there was a gentleman who is the 4th richest person in Australia. He used to own Super A-Mart, Super A-Mart. He sold it. He's one of the biggest landowners in Australia. And he is saying he won't do anything or talk to any of his tenants about rent before the government say what they're going to do about rent. And I kind of get it, because I'm having the same problem with my dad's tenants at the moment. They're contacting me because, remember, us or them. So they come to me rather than going to my brother, because my brother gives the company line, whereas me, I'm kind of like a bit more friendly to them. And they're like, look, we're really struggling. We don't have, you know, the money to pay rent. And I'll go, well, the problem is the family still has to pay the mortgage. The family still has to pay all of those debts. So it's just trying to organize those thoughts. But we really need to transform our thinking away from it's business as usual and, excuse the language, but F you pay me, which is kind of the old school way of doing business, which puts money above everything else.
And it's also a bit of a win-lose situation, serious game. So I'm curious, as a kid and as a teenager, because you're quite passionate about business and how the world economy works from a pretty young age. Were you still interested in toy at that time, like playing with toys?
I don't really think I was. No, I mean, I used to enjoy playing Lego, and I used to enjoy playing cat guns and stuff when I was younger. But yeah, I was more interested in helping people understand which toys they should buy for their kids and that sort of thing. I was less. Toys now are a product to me, as opposed to the magic of them being the illusion that they are. So I think I grew up very young.
What about your siblings? Like, did they gravitate towards toys as well?
My brother was older than me by 2.5 years, and so he was already well in the business by the time. So I remember I would be 11 or 12 years old when we were sat in France, and my dad was like, I really want to buy that field next door, but I just don't have the money. And my brother, if I was 12, my brother would be 14 and a half. My brother goes, it's all right, Dad, I'll lend you the money. So at 14 and a half, my brother would have already been working for a number of years and had saved up enough money to lend my dad some money to buy a field.
Yeah, because I'm thinking that these days, like we limit our kids to the devices and screen time, etc. But sometimes what you resist, it persists. But if you give them the abundance of it, like for example, you have access to a lot of toys, whereas a lot of kids say, hey, don't play with toys all the time. When you got abundance of it, it's always going to be there. It's not something that you have a big urge to go and pursue. And so is fascinating. That sometimes that the paradigm that we try to control, whether it's with ourselves or our kids, is actually it may be counterproductive.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, Gary, and I think it's contextual, because you touched on a real big passion of mine, which is screen time. I'm as me and my wife, my wife is really on board with on this, and we are limiting screen time as much as possible, because yes, screen time is a very useful tool and kids love it, and it really helps kids to, it's the second babysitter basically. But the problem with it is that all the research I've read shows it neurologically changes the brains of young children. And also, as well, not going into any conspiracy stories, the facts and evidence are that if you give somebody a screen, you are allowing somebody else to program your child. And there is a lot of programming in children's TV shows, a lot of programming, whether that is from just the simple idea of humanizing animals. So Daniel Tiger is a tiger, but he's also a tiger who speaks and talks and is a person. Now, my kids loved that show, and same with Peppa Pig, but there is evidence to show that has implications, and it only may be minor ones. But when you stack those on top of Barbie, for example, and we used to sell a lot of Barbie, to be fair, so you know, I flipped from one side of the fence where I used to sell a lot of this naively, not understanding the consequences, to now understanding the consequences. If any of you are parents out there, and I've got girls, so the book that I read is what in the world are we doing to our girls? And maybe I can give you a link to it, Gary, to put in the down below in the chat function.
For sure.
I've read a lot of books just to look at what is the programming, what are we being programmed with, and you know, there's a lot of adult programming that happens, and we can, that's what I'm looking to change and transform, and we'll get into that later. But that screen time, not only does it change the neurochemistry of the body, not only does it change the chemical receptors on the end of the neurons, not only does it change the predisposition of the child and affect their behavior and their moods just from the technology, we now have got the fact that it actually is imprinting their view of the world with something that we might not necessarily agree with if we took the time to watch it. Me and my wife will vet all of the shows that our kids watch. We want to watch them first, because otherwise, there was one kids show that we started to watch, and they were being really mean to the other child, really, on the TV show. And it's like, so what? Yes, I get that's natural behavior that's going to be found out in a classroom, but we don't want it modeled on TV.
That's really intriguing. Like I didn't pay attention to any of this TV show until like my awakening experiences, started seeing the world differently, including all the programming from the TV shows, like from the fairy tales that, hey, like happiness comes from the external stuff. Like if you're not a princess, you're not going to be happy, and you need to be living in a castle, and you need your romantic partner to be someone a certain type of looking before you actually fall in love with them, as opposed to a frog. A frog is actually, when you kiss it, it can help you going on a spiritual journey. But that's another topic. But I was curious on the Peppa Pig, the talking animals. What impacts does it do?
There's a word for it, which is, it's humanization of animals. It changes, and again, I'm only paraphrasing here. If you're really interested, please, Google will give you an access to all of this research. But there's a word for it which means that the child doesn't understand pets in the same way they could. It kind of elevates that humanization is better than being an adult, being a pet, a animal. And so it's kind of saying, like the princess, and like, you know, if you marry a princess, or if a princess marries somebody with money, then you have a better life. It's also, well, in the pecking order, an animal is a better animal if they are humanized. So it's
Yeah.
elevating the only marginally and very, very slightly. And I'm just picking up on a subject that my wife raised with me the other day. I am not saying, you know, this is the whole ethos of what I think about. All I'm saying is that for everything that we see, for everything that either you or I put out right now, or other departments are putting out, programming departments are putting out, we have to be really vigilant, because it is programming. Whether it is us sitting in front of a TV set and turning our mind off, the unconscious mind is unable to tell a difference between what it sees on TV and what it sees in the real world. So the unconscious mind, which is the 7-year-old boy in my case, that is listening to everything that happens in my mind, my mouth, everything that goes on. It's the mind that is making the decisions as to whether I breathe, the heartbeat, all that stuff. When I see a fire on TV, the unconscious mind doesn't have the logic that my mind does to go, oh, that's in New South Wales, that's 1,000 miles away, that's okay. My unconscious mind goes, shit, cortisol level up, I have to get ready, I might have to run. And so, just as that example, we have to be really careful. There is again, we're just going off on a bit of a sideline tangent here, but there's a lot of research that shows that first player shoot 'em ups, the games, are desensitizing the world to killing and death.
Yeah.
And so I know a lot of my friends play computer games. Me, not so much. I sold them and I helped launch Sega in the UK, but I don't necessarily, you know, I love Sonic Hedgehog, for example, because it's kind of like it's not a dangerous game. Like, he doesn't go around killing things. Like first player shoot 'em ups where you see blood and guts and gore, or one of my favorite games when I was growing up was Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah.
Where you literally can go and pay for ladies of the night and then take them off and then kill them and get them rob their money. And like, it's what programming does that, what's that sanctioning on some level in the mind?
It's interesting though. I read conceptually I understand it, and intuitively I think there's a lot of truth to it, and it probably constitutes a lot of behavioral issues. There was one piece of research that I was reading that the Japanese, they play a lot of video games, but yet it didn't affect their behavior. I think maybe if certain in the context of certain environmental framework, especially if certain piece of virtue or cultural conditioning is missing, then it can, I guess, be quite a big problem. But if the core foundation of respect and whatever else that's needed in place to create a harmonious society is in place, maybe that wouldn't have as big of an effect. What do you think?
So I agree and I disagree. Most of our thinking, and I started this conversation off talking about we have to change our thinking.
Yeah.
Most of our thinking is based on incorrect information. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that nearly everybody watching this will have gone to university, I'm guessing. And nearly everybody who's watching this will have done some form of further education. All of the work that I've done in the last 10 years, all the growth hacking work I've done in the last 10 years, whenever I've had somebody come out of university, even if they are the highest scoring student in that university in the courses that I get them from, so marketing, or sales or business development or business logistics or business management or any of those, they have so little information about the current state of the environment in terms of what current business practices are, what current technology is. Because the university, and this is changing a bit now, but the universities used to have, they used to use books. Those books were written years before. The people who wrote those books got their knowledge years before that. And so there was this big lag between the information we receive and the information that is the latest take on reality. So why I'm saying that, and I'll bring it back to your Japanese statement earlier. The thing is that we see the world as a physical thing. We're starting to be able to overlay this informational idea on top of it. And so the physical world would be, well, it's either this rock, or it's this rock, or it's the gap in between these two rocks, in kind of the way that we think, the way we explain things. Whereas actually it's much less physical. And so when you throw a rock into the water, or throw two rocks into the water, and those waves kind of hit each other and cause another third pattern, that's the way that all of these ideas come together. They're kind of, they overlay each other, interlace, and they cause a new type of thinking. So when you said that it's the culture of, it's the culture that has the potential, the virtues of the culture that has the potential to really help negate some of the negative consequences of video games in this scenario, it has some truth, because absolutely in Japan, they are very organized and have a lot of rules in their culture. They're very, if you know spiral dynamics, they're very four-based in their thinking, a bit like Singapore. And what that means is that there's a lot more boundary and structure and constraints. So therefore, there's more effort that needs to be made to break through those than maybe somebody who's a 5. And by the way, these numbers are not hierarchical. So a 4 is not better than a 5, or a 5 is not better than a 4.
And some people refer the 4 as the blue and the 5 as the orange.
That's right.
Yeah. Absolutely.
A 4 is rule-based consciousness, just to those that aren't familiar with it. So just to give you a very quick shot, so they go like this. 1 is fight or flight, which is beige, which is the bottom. And then we get tribal, which is where people come together to survive, and that's purple. Then we get somebody who in the tribe goes, you know what, I can dominate everybody, get them all to work for me and do nothing. And that's dictatorship, or the power of me, and that's red energy. And then we go from red to, well, now the tribe's putting rules in place to stop that dictator from doing that, which is the dynasties that you get in Japan. I mean, they're such an old culture that their culture has developed that they will never really go back to a 3, because they've got so well-defined rules and development. It also means that when they progress to 5, which they have done, which is the commercial, entrepreneurial, production style mindset, the capitalist mindset, they're actually really good at it, because they've got all the rules to follow to get that. I'm not sure of where they're going with 6. 6 is, sorry, so that's, as you quite said, yellow. 6 is green, which is we've made our money in 5. Now we go to 6, which is now we need to look after the planet and help people. 7 is the ability to integrate all of those below. And 8 is the emergence of a new world. 8 is the emergence, which is the experience I had with my death experience, which is the realization of oneness. The realization that there is no separation, and that actually on some fundamental level, there is an interconnectedness between all things. And then it goes on, but the spiral repeats, but just on a different octave or a different level. So back to your original question. So the original question was, what do I think about the framework of a culture having an effect on the programming of video games in this instance? So I think that certain predispositions make you more susceptible than others. And bringing this back down to what we can do. As parents, we can do our best to form a rock-solid model of the world for our children that allow our children to have an exploratory mindset, but still be rock solid in their model of the world, so they are less susceptible to outside indoctrination, that they have a developed critical faculty that they can question with, and they have a developed sense of self which allows them to have their own belief set, and that they have a connection to source, God, themselves, whichever way we want to phrase it, that allows them to take their sense of authority from within and not without.
That's great. I can understand that. Yeah, what you say, even on the surface level, if Japanese culture as a whole, there's a lot less crime and violence, but inside, who knows what's happening in the world inside? There isn't a lot of the programming through the behavior domestically at home or whatever. Maybe it's not even externalized, internalized. There's turmoil going on through the programming from the video games.
Yeah. And I'll give you an example. One of my friends was the very senior at one of the American banks in Japan. He ran the trading desk. And I think he was fired for wanting parental leave when his kid was born. Because in Japan, there's every culture has its underbelly. In Japan, one of those is that you work and you work and you work. Like, you really work. 80 hours is normal. Falling asleep in your suit on the way home from a karaoke bar because you're going to sleep somewhere other than home because home's too far to go to. They even have, there's a word for it. It recently got changed, but there was a lady of 21 who did 135 hours in a week and committed suicide. But it's actually there's a challenge with overworking in the Japanese culture. So all cultures are affected differently. All cultures have different programming, and that's the great thing. We are here to learn from everybody. What actually I'd like to do with you, Gary, is I'd love to close a couple of loops off. So one of those loops is, you asked me what did I do after I left working for my parents. I'd love to give you that quick path, so that gives the bedrock to the second loop I'd like to close off, which is talking about programming and how we can be the gatekeeper to our door. What does Tony Robbins say? You have to be the sentries at the gate to your own mind. And so I'll go through what brought me to this point. Why is this now of interest to me, and what is my ultimate goal and passion to make change?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Awesome. So I left working for my parents because I couldn't see them changing and felt it too restrictive. I set up a web design company in Flash. Didn't realize that Flash was not actually going to go anywhere, and it wasn't the best form of web design language at the time. I went to London for funding for a concept that I came up with that actually would be as at home today as a startup as it was when I founded it in 1998. And the startup, in short, was it was proactive rewards on an individual level. So like you accumulate air points or miles. Well, this was you get interactive rewards based on your previous behavior. So if you bought a holiday at Boots, at Thomas Cook, then you would get discount at your next purchase of suntan lotion at Thomas Cook. And it was a proactive way of giving rewards and points. In order to make this happen, we had to build a broadband network in the UK. I didn't realize. I should have stopped there and I would have been a billionaire. But that was just one of the things on one of the pages of the business plan was, first we've got to build a broadband network in the UK because that's going to carry the data.
And this was back in 99, right? Where people are still on
98
56.6.
AOL dial-up time.
Yes.
And the second thing was global data systems was another part of the business. And this was a data warehouse. Thank God I didn't do it because it was so big, brother. A data warehouse that was going to store all of the point of sale information from all of the purchases throughout the UK that would then serve information back to get you to have benefit on your next purchase. And the third thing was what was called a one card, which I've just literally about 2-3 months ago, I saw this come out as a Kickstarter or one of those crowdsourced campaigns where you can have a digital card that you put all of your cards onto it, store cards and credit cards. So this was called the one card, and it had an RFID chip on it so that when you walk past kiosks that we were going to put into supermarkets and in the high streets, it would recognize who you were. A 3D avatar of choice would come up on the screen and it would have a conversation with you saying, "Hi, Gary, how you doing? I love the fact you just bought the holiday to Thomas Cook. I'm sure you're going to love Tenerife. Why don't you go to Boots? They've got a 3-for-1 offer on suntan lotion for you." And it was just an amazing idea. 20 years ahead of its time, 30 years ahead of its time. And I knew I was on something when I had the 2 senior partners of KPMG in a room after my presentation, be silent for 5 minutes, and then both swear with holy euphemisms. And I raised £350 million as a 19-year-old for this. Like, it was insane. And what I didn't know then that I now know is that you have to move very quickly because otherwise somebody is going to usurp your idea. And so what happened was, while I was still planning everything, somebody had seen the business plan, had seen what was going on, and went, "Oh, broadband network. I could just do that little bit." And so the broadband network part of it disappeared off, and all of a sudden the financiers went, "Well, that was a big part of it, owning that network," and so it disappeared in about 6 months. Fortunately, I'd only spent about $50,000, so it wasn't too much of a mistake, but it was a massive learning curve. And from there, I went into IT, IT sales, understanding IT, because I realized that technology was where it was at. So I moved progressively further south to London and moved to progressively larger companies. So started working with value-added resellers selling new products such as load balancers, firewalls, all sorts of stuff. And looking back, the universe had a plan for me. I now know this because I remember working for a company that did email security. And I remember getting leads from that company. And one of the companies that I rang was the governing body for the United Churches. And this was basically, it worked across all churches or a lot of faiths. And this would have been before 2001. So this would be 2099. I didn't know any better. Nobody knew any better back then. But this guy said he wanted to have email encryption because he wanted to stop journalists intercepting emails where they were telling people in churches to stop doing things they shouldn't be doing. Now, today I can assume that's probably paedophilia based on, everything that's come out in the recent times. But back then I didn't know any better. And it didn't feel right. So I didn't sell him the solution anyhow. But it was just interesting that I've always had that moral compass, which has prevented me from making a sale where I felt that it just wasn't worth the money. So I went on from there. I was working in London. I remember I was working for a IT company for banks and insurance companies. I was really in the heart of the beast, like really in the heart of the beast. 2005, 2006. This was fresh after 9/11 had happened, a few years later. And so I'd had this divergence. 9/11 had really triggered my tinfoil hat card carrying membership. For those of you that don't know what that means that I was into conspiracy theories, like understanding what was going on and trying to find a different narrative to what the truth was. And at the same time, I was as corporate as you can get, working IT for banks in finance and share trading. And I remember in 2006, I did my platinum partnership, 2005, 2006. And I went around the world and I was trying to explain my death experience, which was when was that? 98. And so
what happened there?
So
you can't just glance over to say, "Oh, I have my near-death experiences," and just walk right past it.
No, you know what? I'm probably unconscious leaving the hooks in the storyline. No, it's not that. If you see the way that I eat very similar to my daughter. I'll leave the bit of food that I like the most, and I'll eat the stuff I don't like first to come back to it. And that's, that's all we're doing. So yeah, let me tell you about the death experience. So the death experience was literally, I used to go out and party. I remember that at the same time as working in my mum and dad's department store and in their chain of stores and their businesses, I was going out and partying. All my mates were still at school. So I had to find another group to hang out with. And I really got into rave music. And so I was going to these mass gatherings where it was unity. The vibe of the whole thing was love, peace, and unity. Together we stand, divided we fall. The club that I used to go to call was Uprising. Like it was an amazing, unique time, and I had a lot of drug-fueled experiences and some pretty profound experiences on taking recreational drugs. And I remember that I went partying one weekend and I overdid it. I literally overdid it. I took far too many. I remember telling my dad in the ambulance, in between breaths having been brought back, that I'd had 39 Mitsubishis, which were 89 milligrams MDMA, and a half ounce of White Widow skunk, which is weed, smoke, in a weekend, and plus other stuff that I had. I really just, I was wheeling and dealing at the time. I had lots of cash, and I was just like, I was enjoying myself. I wasn't really thinking about what I was doing. I literally remember, I didn't think I thought I was going to die by I was 21. So my mantra was, live fast, die young, and leave a good looking corpse. And it means that I used to drive. I had one speed, which was cruising speed of 125 miles an hour. I was either accelerating up to that speed or slowing down from that speed. And, that had all sorts of its own problems, notwithstanding the police didn't much like it. But there was quite a few times where I'd turn up on a date to pick a girl up. Their parents had come to their front door, look at my car, look at the number plate, because I had my name on the number plate, 6 Tom, and they go, yeah, she's not getting in that car with you. Well, what do you mean? They went, we've seen the way you drive. You've overtaken us before. Like, great. Can I leave the car here and get a taxi? No, she's not dating you. Great. So back to the partying. So I used to go to a club called Gatecrasher that was and is almost a religion, in terms of that it rode the crest of clubbing in the UK and internationally, and just became huge. And I remember I was the founding member, or I was the founding member for my mate's birthday of the Gatecrasher Shiny Kids, and that's a whole nother story. But we were there. The 150ers used to go meet up every weekend. We knew each other, and one weekend I just took too much, partied too hard, got home Sunday afternoon, sat on my bed, went to my bedroom, sat on my bed, and I was like, right, I can get through this. I was having problems breathing. I was struggling with catching my breath. A bit interesting considering what's going around the world at the moment about respiratory. It was a very good learning lesson about breath. And I couldn't breathe. I really just, I realized my breath was running out, and that at some point that I was going to take my last breath. And I knew it as clear as day. And so I went through to my mum and dad's bedroom. My dad was in bed. My mum wasn't yet. I got in bed with Dad and I said, Dad, I got a problem. I can't breathe. Can I have a cuddle? And my dad didn't know how to cuddle me, or didn't want to hold me while I died. Probably that's more the truth of it. So Mum came into the bedroom. Mum held me. I remember like fighting a bit longer, and then that was it. Peace, absolute peace, and letting go. And next thing I know, so I remember being floating on the ceiling, and the ambulance. I remember the ambulance arriving. I remember everything coming through the front door. At the time, I could see through the walls. Wasn't the first time this had happened that I could see through the walls, actually, coming to think about it. But that's another experience. But I was obviously in a different dimension, because I mean, I didn't have the tunnel, didn't have the life review. I just was floating on the ceiling. My body had stopped working, and I remember that the ambulance came and started working on my body. And at the same time, there was this omnipresent version of myself that I was having a conversation with. It wasn't like having a conversation with you where you're coming from one physical place and I'm coming from another physical place. This was my voice, but it was coming from everywhere. And this voice had a conversation with me about, what's going on. And I remember looking down at my mum and seeing the fact that my mum was distraught. I remember feeling that I realized my mum loved me. And I know that's probably a daft thing to say, because of course your mum loves you because she gave birth to you, right? But I remember feeling her love for me in a different way than I'd ever felt it before. And, I'd been sent away to boarding school at an early age. And so I think that probably had a consequential programming effect on my unconscious mind as to how much I was loved or not loved. And I remember choosing that I could do something about my mum's pain. And so I chose to come back at that point to help evolve and ease my mum's pain. And so I remember waking up in my body, taking my first breath, and then not being able to take my breath. And then I remember the whole journey to the ambulance and ambulance to the hospital. It was like I was learning to breathe again, or not even that. When you try and start a petrol engine with a pull cord, and the petrol and the carburetor, it's not gelling in it. It's just not catching it. And you just can't get it to go. And that was what it was like for me. I was trying to bring air back in my body and get my body started again. And I'd breathe, and then I couldn't breathe. And I'd breathe, and I couldn't breathe. And it took about 34, it took the whole journey up to the hospital where I was fighting breathing. And then the hospital took over and put me on an ECG machine, electrocardiogram. And the rest is history. But that was the profound changing moment for me, because at that moment I had a visceral experience of what it's like to be outside of this physical pain, and the visceral experience of being connected to everybody and everyone. So the yoga, in yoga they say namaste. Namaste means that which lies within you, which lies within me. There is evidence everywhere we're looking, all cultures, of the remembrance of this visceral experience I had, but I didn't get the meaning of it at a cellular level until I'd experienced it. And then I had to go around looking for the text that explains that. So where those that are learned, they learn and eventually they get to the point where they have this awakening and they understand. I had an experience that I didn't know was an awakening, that I had to go out and find the words to explain, to understand, and eventually now get to the point where I can relate to people who've had an awakening experience because of knowledge, because I've had the experience and I have the knowledge, but I never had that awakening.
Yeah. Wow. What an experience. Do you try to explain it to people? Did people get it at the time around you?
Now people experience are able to understand it much better. I think I've explained it a lot more and now I understand it a lot better. At the time, I had no words for it, so I had to go and read the Bible. And then the Bible didn't give me any words for it. And so I went and I read the Quran, and then the Quran didn't have any words for it. And then I read the Judaic text and the Kabbalah, and then just over and over and over and over, and just more and more and more and more. This book, I think it was written by a Christian, but it wasn't Christian in nature. They did make a film out of it. It's called Celestine Prophecies. And then they did the 10th Insight, the 11th Insight, and then the trip to Shambhala. And in essence, it was the first book that explained a set of references of language in something so easy to understand. It gave the reader the ability to talk in the terms of energy.
Awesome. So,
are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. So now we're going back. You have your near-death experiences. Do you want to continue on how that changed you as a person, or do you want to continue to close off the loop on how do you progress from your in your career?
Sure. So I think the best thing to do is let's continue on the career, and we can reference back to the near-death experience as we go about how that changed things. So I remember after having had this near-death experience, I went back clubbing the next week, by the way, and everybody was, "Where were you last weekend?" And I was like, "Oh, I was in hospital. I had a death experience. Don't worry, I'm back now." And you know, it took me. There was at that point there was a divergence. There was a divergence for the birth of a new self, while the repeating of habitual behavior of the old self.
Got it.
And it took a long time for me to create an identity around the new self and to assimilate the behaviors of the old self that I wanted and to repattern the behaviors of the old self that I didn't want. And I went on the journey of Tony Robbins and other amazing speakers, Deepak Chopra and John DeMartini. There were just lots and lots of amazing speakers. I remember that I was, like I said, I was in the belly of the beast. I was working away, and the Celestine Prophecy had tweaked something. It said, look for signs, look for numbers. Numbers are a representation of meaning. And so what happens is we'll see 111 or 444 or 555, and they are synchronous meanings. Same way as everybody said 2012 or the first 2001, they were very critical numbers. They're just talking about harmonics, and they're talking about vibrations, and how when you play certain musical notes, they make certain octaves and certain melodies. The same thing is true, that information that has a particular vibration has signifiers to that vibration, and sometimes you'll see those as numbers. So, it might be, you might call me and it's 4:44 minutes past 4, and 4 is the sign for angels, or in numerology. So I remember.
Can we just expand a little bit on that? Like, so I've started studying numerology in my awakening journey, and I was fascinating with Pythagoras and how a lot of these numbers is just how it explains life. So if I'm calling you at 4:44, like, is that I don't think it's coincidence, but what draws me like to call you at that particular time? Or if I look at the clock, it's 11:11, what draws me to look at the clock at that particular time? Is there something from outside of me beaming me to send me a message to say, okay, look at your clock right now, it's we're trying to send you a message?
My belief is that there is nothing outside of ourselves and everything outside of ourselves. So we have to be very vigilant to not be narcissistic. And I think the word is solitude. There's a particular word for it, which is where we think we're the only thing in the universe. But we also have to be very careful not to believe that we are subjugating ourselves to an external higher power, which is how the controlling matrix has controlled us for a long time. In answer to your question, it's to do with resonant harmonics. I don't know whether you've ever had this experience, but God bless my mum. I remember we were sat around the dining room table in France, and she had this crystal goblet. I'm trying to remember the word for it. It's basically a really big, expensive glass, wine glass. And they were from, I don't know, Dad had found them in France somewhere, maybe a car boot sale or an antique shop. Hadn't paid a lot of money for them, so we were using them to drink out of, or at least the parents were. And yeah, they were huge, like not quite the size of a football, but maybe they're in between the size of a football and the size of a cricket ball. Like they're maybe 8 inches in diameter. And I remember my mum sitting there, having had quite a few glasses of wine, as what was customary around the dining room table and conversation when we were in France. And she took a finger and she put it in the white wine, or licked it, and started going round the edge of the glass. And it started making a noise. At some point, that noise reached the exact frequency with which the makeup of all of the glass crystals resonated, and the glass shattered. So we have what's called resonant harmonics, which is where the old expression "birds of a feather flock together." That's what we're talking about. We're talking about where, when you work on yourself, which is where we're going at the end of this call, hopefully to crescend into. I'm hoping we get time. Then you are altering the framework of who you are, the expression of who you are. And from a mathematical point of view, not just binary, but from a scientific, from a harmonics point of view, you are changing the ambient vibration of who you are. And it is that vibration which changes and evolves who you attract, the experiences you attract. And therefore, there are triggers that like a tuning fork, that you just resonate with that moment at that time.
So that's when we say I really resonate with that message, it actually is vibrating at a certain vibrational frequency that you're resonating with. I find that the English word, I'm opening another loop here, but the English word is so unique. There's a lot of hidden meaning behind what we converse on a day-to-day basis. For a long time, I didn't even understand, going down the rabbit hole, what exactly does that mean. I just say it, but there's just so much hidden meaning below the surface. Even like spelling, like spells, is intriguing. Thank you for sharing that.
I would love to come back to that in another, maybe one of these, because for me, language is where it is at. And you're absolutely right. When we spell things, we cast spells. We have the power of creation with our words, because our words are harmonics, and our harmonics cause resonant vibratory responses from that which is around us. And there is a whole rabbit warren loop here that I'll just give you a glimpse into. There is duplicitous meaning in English language. And if you are going to become an awakened entrepreneur and you really want to understand how to transform the world, then the language that most of us use is English in business. And the English language has there are two very distinct sets of meanings that we have to be aware of. One set of meaning is the colloquial comprehension we have of words. The other is the legal structure of the meaning of words. And we all probably have heard of Johnny bit the dog, or the dog bit Johnny. Same words, different syntax, meaning completely different things to Johnny and the dog. When we are interacting with ourselves in business, words have a tremendous amount of power, and we need to understand how these words program our reality. I said I'd come back to programming. This is it. If you want to program a computer, you have to understand the language. Understand. There are two meanings to understand. When I say to you, do you understand? Do you think I mean, do you comprehend? If the system says to you, do you understand? They are asking you whether you stand underneath and submit to the authority of.
Wow.
Very, very crucial. So we'll leave that loop for now, but it needs unpacking at some point, because if we are going to be conscious, sentient beings that manifest our reality around us, we have to understand the programming language which we've used to program our reality with.
We almost like need a awakening dictionary, a conscious dictionary of some sort.
So the reason why this is difficult to put into just a dictionary is because most of our current experience, and this is again still off loop, most of our current experience is built around words in a binary sense. What I mean by that is that they have, I'm just going to take a step back because I think I need to explain the context of binary and sacred geometry first before I can relate words to that. So in maths, there's two very specific sets of numbers. There is the binary set of numbers, which is what all computers operate on. And the binary set of numbers are what all computer and technology currently is operating at. And that's that 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128. It's the exponential set of numbers. That is primarily masculine from an energetic point of view. Nature, on the other hand, generally doesn't follow that set of mathematical law. It follows something called the divine ratio, or the golden ratio, or phi, which is 1.618. This number goes 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21. And so it's basically the two numbers before added to make the next number. If you want to look at your physical self, so I implore you now, Gary, and anybody who's listening to this, take your hand and look at it in front of you. As you look at your hand, if you take the distance between your thumb and your little finger, and your little finger and your index finger, if you take those two measurements and divide them by each other, you'll get 1.618. If you take a branch off a tree, the way that it spirals, the distance between each new growth has a distance of 1.618. It's called the divine ratio because anything that is carbon, life-based, that grows to this harmonic. So the reason why this is important is because the world has been very male-dominated. We all talk about women in leadership. Well, yes, I agree with women in leadership, but I don't agree with women in leadership. I agree that we should be putting the feminine essence into leadership. Whether that is a gay guy who has a dominant female essence, whether that is a heterosexual guy who has a highly worked up feminine essence, who may or may not have balance between their masculine and their feminine. As it happens with me, I've worked on my masculine and my feminine balance, so I have a strong both masculine and feminine core. Most of us have a dominant core with a dominant masculine and dominant feminine. There's nothing right or wrong, and that's nothing to do with our sexuality. That's to do with our essence and how we think and how we show up. So the binary, if you look at sacred geometry shows how these numbers show up in their mathematical form, their shape form. And masculine is very much more right angles, where feminine is much more curvature. The reason why that's important is because the mathematical binary, looping back to words, the dictionary of ascended words, or the dictionary of amazing words, it's still very mathematically masculine way of looking at things, because a lot of those words won't make sense unless we have a visceral bodily experience to go with them, which is the feminine experience. So you have to, when doing this and when teaching this in my courses, I have a logical side to it, which I explain, and then I have an experiential training which embeds it in the body. So I'm going to close off that loop because it was a big loop. The one thing that we'll come back to is that the power of words, and that is something that I believe all individuals would find it prudent to observe the words which they think and the words which they speak, and be highly aware and conscious of the consequence of their words.
Yeah.
There is a caveat to that, and that is the universe doesn't, the universe has a time buffer. Because if we said, oh, I wish I had a pink elephant, or I wish it dropped dead in a fit of anger, if there wasn't a time buffer, you'd have a pink elephant sat on top of you and you'd be dead, or that person had dropped dead, and that'd be most inconvenient. So there is a time buffer. So therefore we don't have to be, you can play with this. you don't need to be too serious about the way that you use your words. You don't need to get off this call and go, oh my God, I can't use any words again. I can't have conversations with people. And I've been through that, so that's why I know. At one point, nobody wanted to speak to me because every time they spoke to me, I would be so editing the way that I was speaking, I'd edit the way they spoke as well. And they just, dude, I want to have a conversation with you. I don't want you to edit how I speak. I don't want to be coached all of the time.
Yeah.
And so it's an awareness that we should have, but not one that we have to have regardless, at the cost of anything else.
Yeah. And I think like the language we have is gotten us to humanity to this point. And like I was saying, even the suggestions of having like a Awaken dictionary, like, is very limiting, because if I said I love you, like what my interpretation of I love you is could be very different to your interpretation of what coming from me saying that I love you. And from what I know, like that's why if we to transcend to the next level of communication, like telepathic and you actually getting or feeling how I feel is even more important than just the words alone, which is very binary or very dualistic in its nature.
There is definitely a magic to words, though, for certain. And starting to investigate that magic, you'll start to see clues in the words themselves. I'd like to go back to the numbers point in our conversation and progress from there. So the book, The Celestine Prophecies, talks about numbers and harmonics and energy and vibration and being able to see this, the energetic quantum soup that we live within. And by the way, this is absolutely critical. The reason why it's critical is because we are moving to silicon-based life forms that are going to think in ways we can't conceive, at speeds we can't conceive, using physics, which we currently can't conceive. What I mean by that is all of our current computers are based on classical physics. Quantum computers are based on quantum physics. Our language, our experience of reality is based on classical physics. We have to upskill our knowledge about quantum physics so that we can adapt our communication styles and our perception of reality for quantum physics. So then we might be able to have parity with these new silicon-based life forms that we're birthing into this world. Numbers and harmonics. Let's unpack that another time, because I know we've got a bit of time left. So, Celestine Prophecies. I was in London, and I'd had this. I'd working in the belly of the beast. I'd be trying to figure out what was going on, and I remember I was on the train, and I looked up at the tube, and I saw this advert that said, "Philosophy Now. Join your short 12-week course." All right, why not? Shits or giggles, let's do it. Because I'm somebody who likes to read the signs. I'm not saying I'll get home and pour myself a cup of tea and look for the signs in the tea leaves, but I have had enough experience now to know that there is no such thing as coincidence. By the way, just as a caveat, if any of you are in the middle of poo-pooing somebody else's viewpoint about conspiracy theories, just look for any synchronicities, because success always leaves clues, and so there's always clues there. Anyhow, so I'm on the train, I see this sign, and I go and I do, and I go into this class, and I'm in about the 8th or 10th week of it, and it's pretty powerful. We're talking about concepts that I didn't know about, but I could relate to. We're doing meditation, and I think it's amazing. And then on the 5th of the 5th of the 5th, so the 5th of May 2005, 5 of us, after the event, we all went to a pub to have a pint afterwards for just, nice summer's day, spring day. And we sat at the pub, and the bar bill came to $12.12. And I remember the conversation between the five of us that night was mundane and infiltrated with supernatural. And by supernatural, I mean out of the ordinary. I mean just on another level of dimension of thinking. And it was amazing. And talking about harmonics, one of the guys that I met on that night, he went on to introduce me to my shaman teacher. That's a whole nother storyline. And I'm just going to jump into that for a second, because I knew that there was something magical about it. I needed to know more. When I'm in the house of the guy who's hosting the teacher and his wife, and before we start the practice, he talks about how he's developed a scientific tool that searches out the harmonic of the illness in the body, plays back the equal and opposite inverse frequency that then cancels out the frequency and eradicates any illness in the body. And unfortunately, a lot of these healing faiths have not made it out into the world yet. I mean, if you look at the temples in Egypt, they had healing rooms that were harmonics, that had a particular resonant frequency, that when you went into them, they had a causation on the body and the health of the body. So we're starting to learn that now and starting to see more. But I remember we all sat around, we opened the medicine wheel, we started to do meditation, we went into our dreaming state, and I saw a bit of a fire, and I saw some glimpses and some flashes, and I had a really good old time. It wasn't as clear as watching a Hollywood movie, but, it was pretty good. And then we come out about an hour and a half later, and everybody's explaining what happened. And then it comes to, I haven't had my turn yet, and it comes to the shaman's wife, who is also a shaman and natively from the tribes in Mexico. And she's going, blah, 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 Tom, blah, blah, Tom, blah, 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 Tom, Tom, blah, 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 Tom. And obviously I don't speak Mexican, so I don't have a clue what she's saying. And my teacher then starts to explain. And she had sat there watching my dream. She was explaining what I was doing in my dream. She was telling me about the fact, you danced so well around that fire. And when you went and did this, it was amazing. And you've got such... I'm like, well, thanks for a start. I appreciate the praise. But I had my eyes closed and I was dreaming inside my head. How were you able to watch what was happening and speak about it? And that was what really was one of those endless stream of experiences that I could talk to you that I've had since. But that was one of the first ones that really started me on this journey of experience, explanation, experience, explanation, experience, explanation.
Yeah.
And I wanted to know more. I was hooked. That was it. I was in. There was no plant substances, just to be clear, in that experience. That was solely just a meditation experience.
Yeah, wow. So obviously you've gone deep into this spiritual path, I think partially instigated by your near-death experiences, but it's probably always going to be one of the paths that you're destined to go on. These other dimensions or multi-dimensions I'm looking at is, to me, especially at the very beginning, is so fascinating and intriguing that it's almost like Alice in Wonderland, like this new world that we don't know, sometimes scary or confusing at the beginning, but it's wow. And the more that you learn, the more that you know that you don't know, but the more that you've got a curiosity to wanting to learn. So what eventually granted you to come back and because now you're a transformed entrepreneur, like it's almost like in the spiral dynamics, you've gone to gone to experience the higher consciousness, but now that you've integrated it all into your entrepreneurial practice, but not just as an entrepreneur to make money, but in using your wisdom, your knowledge to impart through business to transform humanity, or do your bit to add value to the rest of the population. So what brought you back?
If I may indulge the viewers, the listeners, a while longer, there's a little bit further to go in the story going outwards before we talk about the return.
Yeah, I'd love to hear it. Yeah.
So from that point, I investigated into the dreaming state, the dreaming world, understanding the sleeping dream and the waking dream, as the shamans talk about it. So when you're asleep at night, the dreams, and when you're awake during the day, what most of us call reality, but what they call the waking dream. So
that is so funny, because remember somehow we just randomly connected because of one message you posted in the group that I was going to opt out of, and I just saw that your message was so intriguing. It was calling out to me, and I reached out to you. And after just 2 messages of the pleasantry, hello, how are you? I'm saying, hey, like, can you tell me about like why do we have dreams, and what is the purpose of that compared to the psychedelic dreams and lucid dreaming, and wanted to learn all this about dream time. So it's like there's no coincidence, like you said, and we just from our first call we just go along, we just talk for a long time, and I could spend days and weeks and months of learning from you. So yeah, sorry to interrupt your sharing about the dream. So I just thought that reminded me, that was the point on how we got started in our conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd just like to put pause for 1 second, because the possibility that might happen is everybody who listens to this, they get taken outside of reality on a journey, and then me and you will finish this conversation and everybody will stop listening to us and they'll go back to normal reality. And right now there is a very individual unifying dream the world is having together, and it's very real to a lot of people. And at the same time, the shamans would say that give no more importance to your waking dream than your sleeping dream. What that means is that we get very fearful and attached to our waking dream because of our visceral experience of the dream. It feels so real. But in essence, it's actually an echo of the past. We project our consciousness out into the world, and what we experience as reality is that being projected back to us. So the biggest challenge that everybody I meet and speak to has, me included, is to not take the past experience as being the precursor for future experience. Because everything you experienced in the now is actually past. So most people go, well, it's what I'm experiencing in the now, so it must be what's going to experience in the future. But that's not the truth. They're just bringing from the past into the future. And so because of what's going on right now around the planet, it is absolutely critical that we practice mindfulness of our words and how we use our words, mindfulness of our emotions and how we use our emotions. And I wish we could spend 3 or 4 days talking about this, Gary, because there's a whole science around our emotions and our electromagnetic field of our body, and how we interact with our immune system based on our thoughts and our emotions, and how that changes things. But to surmise it very quickly, because just while we're talking on the waking dream, I want everybody listening to this to remember, or watching if you do it as a video cast, that everything is temporary. This too shall pass. And we are insanely powerful. And the information that is being shouted and repeated on TV and in the media is only one part of the dream. It's actually only one type of the dream. And because this world outside of us is no more real than our sleeping dream, and quantum physics will show the science behind the fact it's not physically solid, it's 99% space. It just has a real tangible feeling of being physical, which is where I said that our classical understanding of physics has to evolve. Our cumulative power of our thinking can transform our local dream. That means the dream around us. So, a visceral example of this was, if anybody has ever heard of Thoughts from the Universe, Mike Dooley, Tut, he does Thoughts from the Universe. And I remember Mike was talking to us about a experience he had where he was driving through the desert, and he'd been thinking about wanting to meet one of the princes. And he was driving through the desert, 2 o'clock in the morning, and bam, his car gets T-boned. And it just turns out that it's a prince, one of the Saudi princes in the other car. And they swap details and they talk about it. And he said to himself, I could have used 2 more words in my goodbye with the person I left. I could have moved lanes twice in order to be in that exact mathematical triangulation geometrically, so those 2 cars hit, is something so unbelievably impossible from a chance point of view that one could question, was it chance? And he said he'd been wanting to meet somebody, and so he'd manifested it. And so we have this power to manipulate and mold our environment around us. Same thing as when we vibrate and we see harmonics such as 444, 111, me and you resonate and we got together. The same thing is true, is that we have this power to infuse and radiate outside of us a harmonic that will transform our environment and will have an impact on our experience of that environment, because it can influence the waking dream. Now, I'm going to come back to that, but I just felt it was a real powerful message in that moment because of the current experience we're having. Remember how powerful I said words were? Well, I'm in Australia, and they never called the global financial crisis the global financial crisis. They called it the GFC. It was easier. Too many words. And so it didn't have the same impact. If anybody's read Harry Potter, they talk about he who shall not be named, because words have power, as opposed to saying Voldemort, right? If anybody saw Beetlejuice, don't say Beetlejuice 3 times. Same thing's true. I think in NLP, which is hypnosis, there is something called tags and something called phrase anchors. And those phrase anchors can be used to build anchors of other people's consciousness and to get them to think in a certain way. We have to be very careful of the phrase anchors being used around the coronavirus, and that is one phrase anchor at the moment. I call it CV because it sounds much more friendly, right? CV. And so we have to be really careful of how we vibrate our harmonic, our language, and how that infuses our external reality. Notwithstanding, we don't want to negate other people's reality. So there's a lot of people in my circle who want to tell me how bad it is right now, and they want to tell me how they're really upset and they're really scared, and they want to tell me how there's all these people that they're listening about that are dying, and I get that's their reality, and it might be the reality of other people, but it's a waking dream, and we don't all have to share the same reality. And because it's harmonic, those that vibrate higher will infuse a vibratory experience into everybody else's dream, which will raise their harmonic and will change and transform their dream. Let's leave that there.
That was really profound and really helpful to all the listeners. It was really simple. It was actionable, and like I really felt what you have just shared as well. I think like what you said, I heard it somewhere before. When we have a dream, even if we have a nightmare, we wake up and within a relatively short time, we forget about it and life goes on. We don't remember, oh my God, we have the nightmare and how is that going to affect me? Because it was just a dream. But in our waking dream, when we have certain events that happen to us and it has happened in the past, and we project that it's a likelihood it's going to happen in the future again. And that fear is just linger on and create the fear-based projection of the future. So in your whole story about how you essentially like manifest your environments around you, and collectively, the more that we dial down the loud noises from the media and they dare to do a certain job, but we're here to create our own, or almost like upping our skills in discernment and consciously choosing which radio station or which frequency we tune into. We can turn on the TV to a news channel and get all these downloads, or we can just tune into nature. Wow, look at the birds and the bees flying around, or we can tune into our family, our loved ones, tune into kids, how they just play naturally. We've always had this conscious choice, even though the world seems like it may be ending in certain perspective, but in another perspective, the world is so much beauty in this present moment right now. And so I guess your message is just to be the best version of ourselves and enjoy every single present moment. And by that, we'll raise our vibration, and that vibration will automatically be contagious to other people's waking dream. And that's how we can positively influence other people. We can do other social media posts of positive stuff to share around, tag and all this other stuff. But even at its most basic level, if we just enjoying the present moment with love, joy, peace, whatever like higher vibration type of emotions, that will have a ripple effect on humanity and this world.
And I couldn't have said that better myself, Gary. That is a beautiful dovetail into the answer to the question that you asked me earlier, which is, now I've been on that dreaming experience, now I've been on that awakening experience, how have I brought that back into my successful practice as an entrepreneur? So we're almost at the end of the journey that's going to get there. So I'm in London, and by this point I've done a lot of personal development, and I got to the point where I didn't want to spend more money doing personal development. I spent about $500,000 by this point, pounds sterling that is, and I decided that I wanted to be paid for doing personal development. So I got a job doing audio visual in the back of the rooms for speakers, and I had so many different experiences from speakers, from Roger Hamilton, Deepak Chopra, Tony Robbins, Chris Howard, like every kind of speaker. Jeremy Harbour, Grow Some Balls. He used to go out buying companies for a pound down. And I even had one speaker who was talking through 2,500 scientifically documented cases of reincarnation, where children before the age of 5 had such a visceral experience of their previous character, who they used to be, they wouldn't accept the persona their parents had given them, and the police and the authorities were involved. In every case bar one, they were able to validate it to a past life. In one case, the individual was able to go and speak to their brother and sister from their past life and corroborate stories. Fascinating. Anyhow, that's not the point. The point is that I met my wife, we're in London, and we decided we needed to get out of London. And we'd had a few experiences. So a book had shot off the shelf and hit me, and it said off-grid living. And then that was when we were in Amsterdam. And then when we were in London, we were sat at Pogo Cafe, which was a vegan raw food restaurant. Amazing. The best raw food chocolate cake I ever had. No sugar in raw food. Amazing. Anyhow, sat there and this book fell off the shelf and hit me on the head. And it said off-grid living. And we're like, God, there's something to this. We've got to do it. And so we bought a battleship, and we were going to move onto the battleship and live off-grid. But we were looking for timescales, and I remember asking the universe, can we have a sign, please? And you can ask my wife this when you have the pleasure of meeting her. We were on the tube station, and in London, when the tubes come out of the tunnels, there's a big rush of air. And every London tube station, well, not now, clearly, because they're all closed, but have what's called the Metro newspaper, which is a local newspaper that's about. And this Metro newspaper, we were stood there, and it rustled, and then it like flickered through the pages, and then it went and opened up, and across the headline was "Get out of town now!" And we're like, I looked at my missus, and they went, "Can we have a bit of a timeline? I mean, do you mean that I need to go and steal a car and joyride out of town, or do I have time to go home and pack? Like, what's the timeline on this, please?" Because we'd got the message that we had to get out of town now, but we didn't know the time scale. And so we intuited that we weren't in any present danger, that we had a couple of weeks, and so we closed all our business in London, got rid of our apartment, our things, and we moved out of London. And so that really was just that was closing off the energy, because London's a very thick smog of energy, and it's a very hell type of energy, and it's very hard to think outside of that thinking process. If any of you meditate or do work at 3 or 4 in the morning, the reason why it's so easy to think or do meditation is because there's no noise. Everybody's asleep. It's really quiet. And that's why in a city, it's really hard sometimes, especially in London, to break out of that noise. So we're going to fast forward through, not because it's not important, because of time-wise, the experience from that to now. So that being said, just wanted to give you an experience of the visceral feedback mechanism that we can have between our waking dream and our own internal projection of the dream. And if you remember back, I know it sounds like a lifetime ago now, but at the beginning of this conversation, we talked about the guy who was the 4th richest person, the billionaire who used to own Amar. And the fact is that his business model is built on a business model is predicated out of an old way of thinking. It's built on a accountancy practice, which was formalized in the 1500s by a Franciscan friar, otherwise known as a monk, who wrote, probably on cowskin, but leather of some kind, with a quill, a book talking about the secrets of mathematics, and in essence he penned, this is how you account. You have a in and an out account for money. That's how you do it. And you are it's called the single bottom line accounting method. And if you speak to any accountants, there's probably even some listening today who've been to celebrate his birthday in Italy, this guy is revered in accounting practices. And he was really critical in formalizing the bedrock for the next 500 years of how we all account. Well, I spent $10 and I got $20 back, so I've made $10 profits. In, out. Notwithstanding the fact there are people and there is a planet. And so the problem with this accountancy method is that it was written under candlelight. It was when goods moved on the back of an ass, otherwise known as donkey. It was a different world, a totally different world. Maths was probably done by abacus back then. We now live in a world where things travel at the speed of light. Information products. We are using machines that we couldn't even be conceived back then to extract raw materials. They go on this conveyor belt through consumerism, and then they get dumped off at the other end in landfill. And as a growth hacker, which we haven't really touched on at all, but as a growth hacker, the growth hacker's job is to mechanize and optimize that conveyor belt to increase the desire of the public to buy stuff and to increase the fulfillment of those products to the society, and in essence to speed up that conveyor belt, to put a rocket booster on it. Now, for the last 10 years, I've been talking about being mindful about that, doing conscious business, and everybody's been, no, we got it really good. We're selling more shit. We're going to sell more shit. We're just speeding everything up. So to me, notwithstanding the human travesty of this coronavirus, it has a blessing. And that blessing is, it's paused that conveyor belt. It's paused it long enough for people to go, oh, wait a minute. If it never comes back on, what am I going to rebuild in its place? So it's caused a gap in the dream, because a lot of people aren't conscious they're dreaming. So they're not dreaming their own dream. They're dreaming the culmination dream of everybody, or they're dreaming a dream that is being controlled by others. And our job is to control our own dream. So this conveyor belt, I was at an agency. By the way, the guy just as an aside, Gary, the guy who invited me to meet the shaman was the guy who was the founding member of Stake Media, Rare Media, Well Done. And it was with him that I first sold SEO, organic search, to HSBC Bank in 2005. So it was just culmination of all sorts of amazing feeds together. So I worked for an agency in Australia up until 4 years ago. And the last client I had was, they said, I want to grow my business. And I'm like, great, awesome, I can grow your business. But their problem was, their business was augmenting lady parts. So that's designer nipples, boob jobs, and other things that I don't want to repeat downstairs. And for me, the problem with this is that once it's done, you can't undo it, for one. And I'm not saying that anybody on the line who's chosen to have it done is wrong. That's not my call. That's nothing to do with me. All I'm saying is that I want people to be able to be conscious in their dream and make an awakened decision, not just be reacting to external stimulus going on unconscious. And as a growth hacker and somebody who understands NLP and hypnosis, a growth hacker is able to hypnotize through the unconscious stream of social media and the efficiency of clicks of the sales funnel to get people to take action without them realizing it. And if I'd have growth hacked his business, what that meant was I would have not only found all the people that wanted to have plastic surgery, but to reach his business ambitions, I would have had to go out there and find women that were feeling very insecure about their bodies. And I would have had to get them to feel so insecure that they would need to feel that they had to augment their physical body with external parts, and that he was the right person to do it. And I said, look, I'm sorry, I can't do this. As a result, I didn't hit my sales target. As a result, that was that job done, finished. But I kept my morals, and I kept my social conscious, and I kept my compass point. And had I have only been scoring on the Franciscan monk price economics at that point, like the money in, money out, I'd have gone, I could make $1 million out of this. Let's do it. As opposed to $1 million, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of women that are going to have to live with that. I've got 2 kids, a wife, a mum, geez, like friends that are girls, like seriously, I couldn't do it. So I realized that thinking has an economic term, and the economic term is called the triple bottom line. It is called the triple bottom line because it is calculating the effect on the people, on the planet, and the financials, because you've got to make a profit, but you also have to be socially and environmentally calculated and positive. And so that where that lands me is I now help on two individual tranches. I help organizations that have that triple bottom line thinking, or at least their product is that way inclined without them knowing it, to further on that way of growing their business. And the other side of things is I work with individuals to help them to evolve their capacity to be present and conscious in the dream, and how they can infuse their power, which is endless, by the way, into their own body and their own dream to make a difference in the world.
How from your experiences with working with a lot of different businesses, what percentage do you estimate businesses are consciously or unconsciously practicing the triple bottom line way of business?
We're in a evolution at the moment. It has been mandated that we must calculate from a triple bottom line perspective, which is CSR, corporate social responsibility. The problem is, though, is that they're doing the bare minimum to get away with making the maximum profit. The current financial structure that we find ourselves within, that Wall Street has created, if anybody's interested, there's a book or a YouTube video you can listen to called The Creature from Jekyll Island. It talks about the way the Federal Reserve was created and how the whole of the money system that we find ourselves within until about 2 days ago was manifest. I say until 2 days ago because 2 days ago Donald Trump took ownership of the IMF.
Yeah,
sorry,
I heard that
of
too.
the Fed Reserve.
The Fed Reserve.
Don't know how that's going to play out, but so there's a movement to it. There's an evolution, and we've not even gone down the 2012 end of the world, and how we moved from the fifth sun to the sixth sun, and how this is a new age, the age of Aquarius, and how that back ambient vibration of the universe and the galaxy and everything that is has changed the octave of its own dream, and how that's affecting us.
So essentially what you do, you transform to this spiritual seeker, or from an entrepreneur to this spiritual seeker. Now you help entrepreneurs with both the evolution of the businesses, but also the involution of themselves as an individual, which ultimately both of them, it's like the yin and yang, they all tie into each other in some sense.
Yeah, so I have a 9-step process that takes a entrepreneur or business owner's business through optimization and growth hacking, through internal development and optimization of the self, optimization of the culture, and then transforming and progressing past the extraction culture that we live in to a purpose transcending profit maximization culture, and into a new economy called the conscious economy. And I truly believe that any business that starts operating at the conscious economy level will be disruption proof, and that ultimately any business that is not at that level will fall to the wayside ultimately.
Tom, let me ask you, like, you've worked with a lot of entrepreneurs. Is it possible for, anything is possible in this realm of infinite possibilities, but the likelihood of someone becoming awakened, or a more awakened or more conscious of this waking dream without meditation, psychedelics, trance dancing, breath work, like without some of this experiential stuff, and it's just from intellectual, from reading books or watching certain videos, how likely is someone is able to get there? Or is there a faster way for someone to get there? Obviously time is an illusion as well.
So absolutely,
because
there is a faster way.
To put the context around it, just for the listeners that, hey, like, this sounds great, I want to go through like the experiential side, and not just from an intellectual level, hear from like the Eckhart Tolle, the the Bible and other books, the Buddhist teachings, but actually experience like what it like to transcend from just a waking dream. So what is the go-to protocol for them to follow?
I have distilled all of my learnings and all of my experiences and everything that's made me. I'm now 42, and it's taken me a long time on this journey before I felt that I've got far enough out that I don't need to go any further out. I've gone so far out that I've come back in from inside of myself. And now it's not that I can't learn any more in new information in this bent, because I can. It's just there's no new information external that doesn't have an internal reference point for me. So how I've distilled all this is I've built something which is a framework called the Human Biological Quantum Computer. What this allows me to do is to teach individuals through the metaphor of programming computers how to understand their hardware and their software, and how to observe their programming from a programming a computer point of view, and how to reprogram their computer as well. So how to optimize their hardware so it can run faster, quicker, more creative, more innovative thinking, and how to then change the logic and the software that runs on the hardware so that they can evolve themselves. Now, this only can happen because our thoughts will only take us a certain way, because it's logic, which is binary, and we have to have quantum. There is an element of experience. So education, experience, education, experience. One of the questions you asked was, is there a fast, more efficient, more effective route? The fastest, most quickest route for me is just helping people to remember, not to have forgotten.
And how do you do that?
It's not that I have to do that. It's a continual process for those that want to progress, is to remember to come home to themselves, and that they never left. That any separation is an illusion. And if they think that they need to learn something, they actually don't need to learn anything. They just need to remember. So it's not about learning new information. It's about helping us remember who we truly are. And the reason why that's so profound, even though it may not, you may have to hear that a few times to get the profundity of it. The reason why it's so profound is it removes the journey of us having to go anywhere or become anything or do something. All it means is that we can just become more of who we are, because we already are everything we need to be. It's just most of us have forgotten that. We listen to external sources that tell us you're not good enough, you need this. You're not going to be a wealthy individual until you've got a new Learjet. So you're then chasing a Learjet. It's all external. It's all built to make us buy. The truth of the matter is that we are everything we could possibly be already internally. And so we have access to that internally. So it's just a matter of how do we remember not to forget.
Tom, I've got tears like in my eyes and shivers over my body. Through my myself remembering, and especially sped up by the help of plant medicine. One of the first experiences I have is exactly that, like remembering that we are the creator of the universe, and everything around us, we created it for us to get to know ourselves. And the problems, the perceived problem that we have, is for us to experience contrast. If we enter a room of if we're born in a room of white and it's all white, we've never known any other colors, we don't know what white is because there's nothing to contrast. Without the absence of hate, anger, and some of these seemingly negative emotion, if we are love in our core, but we've never had those someone do something negative to us, we wouldn't know the true depth of what love is. If we never had chili or durian or some of this exotic food, someone can try to intellectually explain it to us, but we will never be able to quantify it. That's why when you say that from a binary sense, that you can put in as much intellectual information as you want, but without the experience, the quantum experiences, you still have a limited interpretation of it. And I did this profile called Gene Keys by Richard Rudd. I'm not sure whether you've heard of it. We've all got hidden DNA within us, like what the scientists calls the junk DNA, is because they don't understand what it actually does yet. But the hidden DNA that we've all got certain profile. We all came to this planet with a certain role. Some people are healers, some people are to hold space, some people are teachers, etc. My life purpose is essentially to help people remember. We forgot who we are. We forgot that we are the source, we are the divine. We are a lot more powerful than what we thought that we are. We think that we're victim of our external circumstances, but we're so much more than that. And if there's one purpose, like for me on this planet that I know, is to help people remember. And now that, like when you say, like, or Steve Jobs in his Stanford commencement speech says, you don't know how all the dots going to connect until you look back. Now I can kind of start to see why we got connected in the first place, is to help people remember. And I know that it's unlikely it's possible through this one single podcast. Some people would hear it and it will have a huge trigger that for them to start to wake up to the true power and the gift of just being infinite love and finding joy in every single present moment of their life, being able to be a conscious manifester that I can create the reality I want despite the external circumstances. And I'm sure that we'll have much more deeper conversation. That I've got a whole page of questions I've jotted down. I didn't even get to ask any of them. And we can just keep on going on so much deeper. But I think like what's important in this time of crisis, and I'm mindful of the word. In Chinese, crisis is made of two words. One is opportunity, yes. One is danger. Yes. So in this time of crisis, there's huge opportunity, but yet we see a lot of danger in front of us. As I see, there will be a massive change on the external world in the way that society operates, in the way that we learn, the way that we interact with each other. But the current reality that a lot of people are going through, especially entrepreneurs and businesses are going through, business have slowed and some of them have completely stopped, and their livelihood is at stake. The staff is struggling. In Australia, I guess, and some of the Western countries, the government is printing money and at least is giving something. In some of the third world countries that I know, they are ordered to lock down inside of the home, not allowed to go out. And the government say they'll give them ration, but all they get is like a 5 kilogram of rice. So like people livelihood of the Maslow hierarchy of needs of survival, some of them are actually coming into question. Can they actually survive? So what can you share with them? How do they navigate this, survive this chaotic time, and then to start to self-actualize and to start to thrive on this current opportunity? Because with the current landscape, we know that most of the Fortune 500 companies were started during the Great Depression. So in times of disruption, this is huge opportunity. So how should entrepreneurs approach this time, especially if they're going through current crisis?
The first point is we live in a duality, and therefore it's not possible to continually breathe inwards. At some point, we have to stop and breathe outwards. The planet has been breathing in and consuming for the last 100 years. We've been focused externally on our external having things, more and more things, more and more experiences, even still, but things. This is a gift of being able to go internally. You asked me earlier about, is it possible without plant medicine, meditation, and those sort of things to transform? The first thing that anybody says about technology is, you ring up IT support, you take your phone to the phone shop. In fact, none of us do this anymore. It's not working. Turn it off, turn it back on. Meditation, because we can't die and be born again. I mean, well, I did, so I guess you can, but for most of us, it would be too much of a traumatic experience to do on a regular basis. So the nearest thing we can do is that we can pause the stream of consciousness. And we do that through meditation. Meditation is breath work. It's just simply sitting there and allowing yourself to breathe. Not regulating your breath, that comes later. Not counting your breath, that comes later. It's sitting still, listening to your thoughts, and allowing yourself to disconnect from your thoughts so you no longer have to be run by them. And that is the great gift that we have right now. We're all forced to be inside. That means, because we're forced to be inside, although I'm in a car, which is inside, it's just inside moving, we have this opportunity to still ourselves, to quieten ourselves, to slow ourselves down, and to separate out the noise from that which is somebody else's dream and that keeps being repeated to the point where we believe it's our dream, to hear the small movement of the acorn at the beginning of its journey into an oak tree. That little, just such a slight sound, but if we allow it to take roots through silence and practice, it will allow it to establish. That is the number one thing we have to do. We have to quieten our minds through meditation, or at least pausing silence. Turn your phone off for 10 minutes and sit and just close your eyes. And allow, if you start thinking something, which you will, thank it, and observe separation between you and your thoughts. The biggest mistake all of us make is that our thoughts are us, and they're not. So, that being said, fast forwarding back to the other part of the conversation where you asked me about how all the big companies were made in the Great Depression and all that stuff. I don't want to be facetious and negative, so I'm going to be very brief in this shadow side, and then we'll go into the light. The shadow side is, we've all wanted to buy something and we've waited for the sales until we buy it. If you owned the shop, but there was a rule that saying you couldn't buy at trade, but what you could do is you could force a sale in your shop, which meant everybody else had to do a sale in their shop. What you would do is you would sell off your stock, you would create the sale, i.e. bargain prices, and then you would take all of the money that you've taken out and you would then buy everything at a fraction of the price. There is a story about Mayor Amstel Rothschild in the 1800s. I won't go into his full history, and if anybody's interested, they can look it up. But from a military strategist point of view, great idea. Napoleon lost the French war. His spies found that out and told him. So he sold all of his stock and told everybody in the London stock market, Napoleon's won the war, that's why I'm selling all my stock. Everybody panicked and followed suit. All of the stock went to 5 pence in the pound, or 1 pence in the pound, at which point he was able to take his money and suddenly buy everything. This is why when the stock market bottoms out, and if you don't know Steve Linder and DMAS, worth having a chat with him. Tell him Tom Green sent you. DMAS he used to run the IT systems for one of the biggest banks in America. He does trading and teaches trading and has a system which shows you when things are liable to get to and all sorts of markers. Very, very interesting. Worth talking to him about this. Is sell. Don't wait for it to get to the top. Sell. And then when it gets to the bottom, don't try and buy at the very bottom. Wait till you see it start pick up again, then buy. And even if you make 80%, you mitigate your risks. But that's how those companies made became the biggest company in the world. Because whether they were controlled by individuals that caused the crash or whether they just profited from the crash, I'm not sure. But that's the shadow side. The light side is there is a desire like never before for triple bottom line accounting, for a reset in human connection, for the ability for once for people not to be treated like numbers. And if your organization has a mindful bent, is conscious, is spiritual, is enlightening the loads of all the other people around you, yes, it makes a buck or two, but it is not going, I can make 10 bucks at the cost of everybody else versus 4 bucks that raises everybody else's ships up. Choose the 4 bucks. That is what is going to make the difference.
Wow, thanks, Tom. That's it makes sense. What I guess the last question before we finish this up. I'm conscious of time, and thank you so much for being so generous with your time. And I really look forward to having you on as a guest again to share a lot of the wisdom that you have through. It's ironic. I'm 42 as well, turning 43. So, what do you see the after this big CV thing that's passed? Whether it's going to be another 6 months, 18 months, however long, or maybe this is just the beginning of there may be other stuff that comes and hit us. How do you see? Because you just briefly touched on us being controlled within the 4D matrix. What do you see the new world will look like?
This is a journey. The journey is for us to become aware of what is fourth dimensional programming. So the controlling matrix, which is all of the thought forms from all of the history, from all of the people that program and hold our reality into physical form, but also that repress certain elements or hold it in certain ways. So we started this conversation off about the Japanese and how they have certain cultures and values that they have indoctrinated so tightly that give them certain freedoms, but also repress them in a certain way. The fourth dimensional matrix holds 3-dimensional space in physical form, but it also holds through resonant harmonics particular ideologies that can transform, do transform, but sometimes take millennia or at least generations. Our job as ascended masters or awakened entrepreneurs is to realize our 5th dimensional ascended master form, the I am, in 3-dimensional time and space, in physical manifestation. That means that we ascend outside of the 4th dimensional controlling matrix. It no longer has controllers anymore, and we are now able to transform the 3rd dimensional space we find ourselves within. So one of the things that is critical to do right now is to remember our breath, to focus on our breath. I'm saying that as I'm slightly out of breath, having just run back to this call. I don't know whether any of the listeners have come across the Heart Math Institute or the work of Joe Dispenza. Both have now given validity and scientific evidence to the idea that our thoughts become things, to quote Mike Dooley at Tut. So what happens is we have this thought that is neurochemical in our mind. These neurochemicals, they create feelings in our body. These feelings in our body change the way we breathe. So maybe that is that when we panic, we have shallow breath and it's quite quick. When we are meditating, it's very elongated and calm. So the breath is a signifier for our emotional state in our body. More than that, our breath controls the movement of fluid up and down our spine, how that fluid reaches the pineal gland, and how the piezoelectric effect, which is the conversion from a physical to an electromagnetic signal, which is what the piezoelectric effect is, which happens in the pineal gland. So as we breathe, our breath affects the movement of fluid, the conversion of that fluid to an electromagnetic field that then bathes not only every cell in our body, but an aura around us. So I would suggest that we stop watching the shit show, or stop watching the continuous feed of information, because it's got to the point now where there's so much information out there. I don't know what's true and what's not true. There's so many conspiracy theories about this. There's so much misinformation. There's so much rah-rah. It's almost impossible to tell the truth around this CV. So all we can do is minimize our external inputs. We need to observe how those external inputs affect our breath. Are we deep and calm while breathing? Or if we're watching the news, do we get shallow and quicker in our breathing? Because if we want the best possible immune system, the best possible chance of manifesting a dream which is healthy and well for us and our family, we need to have our breathing creating the electromagnetic field around our body, which is of a high and strong vibration, which will permeate physical space and will hold our strength of our wellness around us. That means observing our language and what we say and what we do, observing our dialogue with others. Because the problem is, Gary, we have, as a culture, been addicted to sugar. When we don't have sugar, we crave it. It's obvious. We have that expression. If we stop having sugar, I mean, I don't have sugar, I have rice malt syrup, but you notice the absence of it. What we don't realize is that the neuropeptides, the neurotransmitters of the neurons of every cell in the body, that bathe every cell in the body, they have become encoded to loving the chemicals that are present in the most experienced emotional state. So what that means is most of us get practiced at experiencing fear. And so neurologically, biochemically, our body craves those chemicals that make fear. And so what happens is, so on TV, it says, there's a boat that's coming to kill you now. I'm using that as a flippant comment because we all know there isn't a boat because we're on land, and how can a boat come on land? So that's why I'm using that as an example. But what happens is that our body goes, and then we go, I can feed on that emotion by going to somebody else going, there's a boat that's going to kill us. And then they go, there's a boat. And all of a sudden you get this mass hysteria of lots of people. And all it is them all having a good old party, but rather than getting drunk on alcohol, they're getting drunk on the biochemical reaction of fear, which is why we have to use breath. Because
Wow.
breath, if we can use breath outside of our experience, if we meditate or we at least have a practice breath work, that means that in the moment of unconscious triggers, so that's our parents saying something to us that resonate from when we were kids because we've gone back home. That means our kids saying something to us that trigger us. We trigger an unconscious reaction. But if we've practiced it enough, and this is still just a practice, which means that sometimes you're going to get it wrong, you are able to take a breath and choose a response rather than a reaction. And that is the power that you have to not buy into the dream that is fueled by negative emotion and fear and all uncertainty and doubt. Like, I don't think in today's world we're ever going to be without. Like, most of us probably haven't ever experienced, 7 cups of rice, 1 a day, with an onion, and do a quarter of an onion per day, and then the last 3 days without onion, just plain rice. Most people haven't experienced that. They don't know what that level of lack is. But I guarantee you that you still get nutrition from that. And so therefore, we're just so used to abundance that we're fearful of contracting, but we're still going to be fine no matter where we are or what we're doing. As long as we trust that the universe has our back, that we are connected to source and manifest, we will be taken care of.
Yeah, so it's the exhaling. It's not like you're exhaling all your oxygen that you've got and you're gonna die. I think that's essentially the feelings that we get at times, that when things are not going to how our ego prefer it to, which is the external luxury and comforts. And I really like what you shared about the breath as the key to surviving and thriving through this situation, because I read it somewhere from the breath affects the mind, which is what you mentioned, and your mind affects the consciousness. This triad, if you're unconscious, then you're also not thinking about how you're actually breathing. Or if your mind is projecting fearful thoughts, you're also not conscious of your breath. So when you can, and the easiest to change, rather than changing the mind or changing the consciousness, is the breath. When you can just slow down your breath, like you'll release all these, you'll calm your nervous system. It doesn't think like a saber-toothed tiger is going to like chew you up like right next to you. But if we watch the news, like more people are getting infected, we think that we're sending a signal to the whole body, and we then start to program our mind that send through the signals to draw that into our reality as that's what's going to happen to us. So yeah, extremely profound. So Tom, like, man, I got so much out of this conversation with you, and I'm sure the listener deeply appreciate you've so generously shared your wisdom and just in a very raw and real format. I will just want to give you an opportunity for the listener wanting to learn more about, hey, what's this like triple bottom line profit that we could study on? I think you've got some books either out there or on the way. And if someone wants to like learn more about you, follow you, or maybe even work with you, where do they go to find? Because I know there's the comedian Tom Green, and you're a comedian, but you're not that same person.
So thank you, Gary. I'm actually launching a business as we speak at the moment. That is, I was about to launch some large, big in-person events where I would people could come and see me speak. Now, as a result of the current environmental factors, I'm pivoting, and so I'm now going to be doing some online training and online consultancy to help individuals in their business. The business is called the Really Conscious Group, and that is the Really Conscious Group. That is a management consultancy company that is looking to help organizations to grow their business and also to affect change and transformation in their business. And I'm more than happy to share my email address, which is tom@thomaswgreen.com. Happy for you to put that in a link for anybody who wants to know further, to have a conversation with me. And at this time, because of where everything is going, I'm offering a 15-minute consultation through Calendly and Zoom, so people can ask questions of how they grow their business, how they work their culture, or personal questions. And the way that is feeding into, there might be opportunity for them to work with my business or me on a personal coaching level, depending on how the eventuation of that 15-minute value exchange is.
Yep, sounds good. Are you active on any of the social media platform?
So I haven't been, and I am about to be.
Okay.
The reason why I say I haven't been is because I struggled for a long time with the knowledge of how addictive those platforms are from a neurochemistry point of view, and how they are built to propagate the slimmest amount of consciousness possible. What these platforms require is you to be conscious enough that you're not on the floor unconscious, that you can move your fingers to click and scroll, but you're not conscious enough to discern whether what you're reading is fact or fiction, or whether the advert you just clicked on, whether you really need to buy it or not. And so I was really struggling with putting my content out there because of that. But I as a result of this new business, the Really Conscious Group, we're promoting my book. People can get a copy of my book, which is it was called Conscious Digital Transformation, but actually I rebranded it called Digital Transformation That Profits, or at least that's what the skin says, because I was trying to make it a bittersweet pill for big corporates to swallow. So they go, oh, profit. And then they'd read the book and go, oh yeah, we need to be conscious. And in essence, this is a progress. And we have a growth hacking agency called the Conscious Agency. And that is looking to help companies growth hack their business and evolve their business. But again, that is not just let's sell some more shit to more people and cause more problems. That's mindfully, how do we increase your value exchange in alignment with people, profit, and planet?
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, Tom, and I look forward to connecting with you again soon.
No problem, Gary. It's an absolute pleasure. I look forward to coming on again and exploring some more ideas with you.
Namaste.
Namaste. Namaste. Namaste. Namaste. Namaste. Namaste.